and welcome back to The Burning Hand of Friendship, a channel devoted to the relics of pop culture that scrambled our brains and the physical media that built the mythos of a new age. I'm your host, Friendo Number One, collector of things, and we are continuing our initiation digging through the sacred box I scored for a $60 donation to my local comic book shop. So let us dig through and uncover the DC scrolls that spoke to me. And we kick things off with Swamp Thing, issues 18 and 20 from 1975, written by David Michalini, stepping in after the legendary Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson run. And the art is by Nestor Redondo with covers by Luis Dominguez, two pros who are neck deep in the DC spooky side of things like House of Mystery. And this is classic Alec Holland. He's still a wandering monster, long before Alan Moore injected his mythos, which personally is my era of Swamp Thing. But I like these Bronze Age spooky tales, which I haven't read the full run, but I grab any issue when I see them, even the beat up ones, totally fine with that. I'm not a CGC dude, out there hunting keys and slabbing these manuscripts of far-out fantasy and transparent coffins, man. It's just not me. But hey, I'm not here to poop in anyone's pudding, so everyone should enjoy comics their own way. And next we have more Swamp Thing, Myra, Volume 2, issues 59, 73, and Annual number 3. And these were published between 1987 and 1988. We're starting with the Annual, which has the amazing Brian Boland cover, and I believe Tom Yates handled the interiors. And I'm trying to rebuild the Swamp Thing run I once had. I still need quite a few Alan Moore issues, but I'm focusing on the Rick Veitch era, especially after the way it all imploded, and they're also easier to find for some reason. But to me, Rick Veitch is one of the great unsung rebels of comics. He came up through the underground and didn't bend to the suits. He was handpicked by Alan Moore to carry on Swamp Thing because he knew Rick could take it deeper into surreal metaphysical territory, including the controversial time travel arc DC pulled the plug on, where Swampy was going to meet Jesus. And DC wanted a rewrite, Rick gave them the finger, and poor Doug Wheeler had to ghostwrite the Book of Revelations without the revelations. But Rick Veitch's legacy goes way beyond Swamp Thing. He's one of those creators who never sold out, man. Just Google his name and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and you will see what real clout is all about. Suicide Squad 64, published in 1992, written by John Ostrander, and the pencils are by Jeff Isherwood, who also did the cover. And this is right in the death rattle of Ostrander's run. I think with this issue, there's only a couple left. And the squad is cracking, Amanda Waller's grip is slipping, and the whole Black Ops machine is starting to eat itself, man. And I've got unreasonable nostalgia for Suicide Squad. At 13, Deadshot looked less like a villain and more like a career path. So yeah, I ordered the omnibus. I'm looking forward to rereading this. Slash Maraud number 1. Published in 1987, written by Doug Munch, art by Paul Goulassi, and these two are always a winning combination in my book. And this is a wild ride post-apocalyptic sci-fi miniseries where Earth is being terraformed by aliens, but our pal Slash Maraud leads a rebellion with a ragtag group of mutants, misfits, and sexy 80s ladies. And as you can see, Munch and Goulassi bring their signature cinematic style, and it works. One of DC's early mature titles pre-Vertigo, and vibing in that same left field zone. Plop number 20, published in 1976, with stories by various writers and various artists also involved, but Robert Slim Johnson did the cover. And I actually have quite a few of these. This is DC's offbeat humor anthology, mixing the sinister with the satirical. We even get an introduction with Cain and Abel, but it's illustrated by Sergio Aragones. So it's zany stuff packed with jokes that probably no longer land, but I always dig the cartoonists involved. Plop has had Wally Wood and Basil Wolverton, which is what got me into seeking these out. Plastic Man number 15, published in 1976, written by Steve Skeets, and the art is by Ramona Fradin and Bob Smith, but the cover is by Ernie Chan. And Plastic Man was one of my favorites as a little kid. When I was about 4, my uncle gave me some of my first comics, and Plastic Man was one of those. And I couldn't really read them yet, but I'd gawk at the pages and carry them everywhere. I'd take them into the bathroom to emulate my dad, who was a heavy reader on the porcelain throne. But Plastic Man is just pure fun. Much like Bronze Age Shazam, it reintroduces a Golden Age classic, but with that goofy Bronze Age twist, and it really is something else. And shout out to Ramona Fradon. Her lines are etched into my childhood brain. I mean, she's just one of my favorites. The Phantom Stranger 36, published in 1975. Another book written by David Michelini, and the art is by Jerry Tallock, with the cover by Jim Aparo. And I have the Phantom Stranger Omnibus on my shelf, but I can't resist grabbing these when I see them. And Phantom Stranger wasn't someone I really paid attention to when I got into comics. I mean, he was just some fedora-wearing dude in Crisis who I barely noticed. That said, I'm all in now. No origin, no identity, no explanation, just a fedora, a cape, and a knack for always showing up right before things get weird. I mean, that's my vibe. So I grabbed a handful of Mr. Miracle. 13 and 14 are by Len Wein and Joe Phillips, with our dude Lobo making a cameo. But we'll skim through number 6 from 1989 with DeMatteis and Giffen, obviously because of Gnort. But I love Mr. Miracle, and it was he who led me to Kirby's Fourth World, back when I didn't even realize Darkseid was one of Kirby's creations. I wasn't a Kirby fan yet, but something about this title always felt a little offbeat, and I liked that. But I also have always liked the odd heroes like Red Tornado or Dr. Fate. But that's me. But back to this, issue 6 is pure late 80s Giffen to Mateus chaos, complete with a cameo by the galaxy's most ridiculous Green Lantern. Love the weird pairings, and even though the tone could be hit or miss, it kept me turning the page. Mask, issues 2 and 8, published in 86 and 87, written by Michael Fleischer, and the art duties vary, but this issue features Kurt Swan and Kurt Schaffenberger, two old school pros you might recognize from Bronze Age Superman, and it's a trip seeing their Silver Age style tackle techno warriors in morphing military rigs, which really was just a G.I. Joe Transformers mashup. I mean, Venom was the name of the villains, and a big ol' rig was basically the team mascot. I mean, come on, sheeple. And this was a pure 80s cash grab, but not that I cared. I was all about the toy propaganda being smuggled in my cartoons. And yeah, this is pure nostalgia. I watched the show, I had a couple of the vehicles, and I had to grab these, especially this one with T-Bob hanging with some ladies from the 80s on the beach. Man-Bat number 2, published in 1975, written by Martin Pascoe, and the covers by Jim Aparo. And the art is by Pablo Marcos, an incredible Peruvian artist who got his US start with Creepy magazine, so it makes complete sense for him to draw one of my favorite Gotham villains. And Man-Bat was part of the rise of monsters and anti-heroes during the Bronze Age. The Joker had his own little series, horror mags were popping off, and right in that mix we get Dr. Kirk Langstrom, a scientist who turns himself into a bat creature and loses his grip. But every now and then, he tries to do the right thing. So the solo series only lasted 2 issues before getting the axe, but I always wanted this one in the collection. Now I just need to track down issue number 1. Lobo, Blazing Chain of Love, with that stylish cover by Dan Barretton. Published in 1992, written by Keith Giffen and Alan Grant, and the art is by Giffen as well. And this totally sums up my taste in high school. I was all about gritty music, edgy comics, and characters who looked like they could be in White Zombie, and Lobo was that dude. The humor is loud and very 90s, brash in a way that might not fly today, but at 17, this was my jam. And yeah, the violence was a lot, but it was all meant to mock those grimdark anti-heroes who took themselves way too seriously, like the blood-soaked solo Wolverine or Punisher. And since this was a mature title, the creators did not pull punches, noses were bleeding. But anyways, I love me some Lobo, I love Keith Giffen, grab the compendium. Kamandi, The Last Boy on Earth, number 33. And hello, Dr. Canis. This was published in 1975, created, written, and illustrated by Jack the King Kirby during his DC run. And this is a post-apocalyptic tale, kind of like Planet of the Apes, but weirder and packed with Kirby's cosmic energy. It's over-the-top chaotic, but still heartfelt. And I've only read a handful of issues, but I'm a sucker for talking animal people, so yeah, I really need to track down the omnibus, as I only know fragments of this story. And I used to always see these in the dollar bin, so I'm going through dollar bin regrets from not grabbing these in the past, man. But like I said, I wasn't a big fan of Kirby's art back in the day. It wasn't until college when I read some back issues of the Eternals that I finally started to get it. Psychedelic storytelling from a straight-edge, no-nonsense journeyman. Justice League of America 194, published in 1981, written by Jerry Conway, art by George Perez and John Beatty, and the cover also by the late great George Perez. And JLA was probably one of the first titles I'd bug my parents to buy anytime we would hit up the Circle K or 7-Eleven, the convenience store spinner rack. That's really where the addiction started. And luckily my dad was a magazine guy and always happy to grab me something to read. And for his 7-year-old, this was the perfect comic. It had all the superheroes I loved: Superman, Flash, Green Lantern, Green Arrow. But I will say I was always confused by Elastic Man as a kid and wondered, why wasn't Plastic Man in this? Who is this imposter? Anyways, had to grab the witchy issue with the tarot cards.
I like my comics a little spooky.
Jonah Hex, 84, published in 1984, written by Michael Fleischer, the same dude who wrote those Mask issues, and the art is by Tony DeZuniga. And in all honesty, I haven't read much Jonah Hex, mostly grabbed this one for that killer skeleton cover by Hannigan and DeZuniga. I did read one of the spookier Vertigo miniseries. It had zombies and the 90s post-apocalyptic remix called Hex, which was kind of like a Mad Max ripoff, but it was fun. But I've never touched the Bronze Age run, and I'm finally cracking open some proper cowboy comics, as I've always kind of disregarded them. Not sure why. I liked cowboys as a kid, but superheroes were just a bit more interesting for my little kid brain. Yeah, just like Atari video games. Much more interesting than cowboy comics back then. Next, we got a couple of Green Lanterns from Volume 2 and Volume 3. We'll skim through the Mosaic Prelude in 17 from 1991 with art by Mark D. Bright, a solid, underrated talent from that era. And Green Lantern was a constant favorite of mine. From the mid-80s through the 90s, I was all about the core. And I remember picking up the Mosaic series and just devouring it. Unfortunately, this era is now overshadowed by the series writer, Gerard Jones, who was convicted of some disgusting crimes. And because of that, his work has been quietly buried by DC, and for good reason. But that said, Mosaic was a big deal at the time, and Jon Stewart remains one of my favorites. I also absolutely love this Gil Kane cover from 165 from 1983. The Forever People, number 8 and 9, published in 1972, created, written, and penciled by Jack the King Kirby, inks and letters by Mike Royer. And we get some bonus Kirby here with a Sandman backup, not to be confused with Neil Gaiman's Sandman, though there is a connection, but we'll save that for another time. And I love the Forever People, first and foremost. Some of the stories can be a little shallow, but Kirby's art keeps me locked, and I get a kick out of watching him try to vibe with the youth counterculture of the time with these idealistic cosmic hippies who don't talk like hippies, barely a hey man to be found, but then again, they are flower people from another universe. They do say groove once in a while, and they let their freak flag fly with their costumes, all while helping us out in their funky super cycle. And oh yeah, for the record, these new god hippies are never stoned. Anyways, this has a Dead Man appearance, so you know I had to grab it. Dead Man 4 and 5, published in 2002, written by Steve Vance, and the covers are by Mike Mignola, the main reason I grabbed these. And we'll skim through the Luis Garcia Lopez and Joe Rubinstein issue here. I've never read this run before. It came out during a stretch when I wasn't really buying comics. All my money was going towards music gear and records. Priorities, right? But I've always loved Deadman, and after reading the omnibus last year, I've been itching for more. And I won't dive into these until I track down the rest of the series. It's a short run, so hopefully not too tough to complete. And yeah, still hoping to check out the Vertigo run as well, but I'm still catching up with all the Millennial comics I haven't read. Dr. Fate number 19, published in 1990, written by J.M. DeMatteis, art by Sean McManus and Mark McKenna. So I've been slowly rebuilding this run, was thinking of doing my own custom bind, but then DC dropped that chunky trade paperback, so I guess I'm good for now, but I'll keep grabbing the singles when I find them, and who knows, cause I really would like this in a hardcover. DC. But back to this, I've always gravitated towards the left field heroes, and Dr. Fate was definitely one of those. And this issue also hits my spooky side with an appearance by Phantom Stranger, so you know weird things are afoot. I mean, we dive deep into identity, rebirth, chaos, and order. We even get a female Dr. Fate, and no one was freaking out about it. Guess Gen X was cooler that way. Doom Patrol Volume 2, numbers 5, 3, 2, and 1, published in 1987, written by Paul Kuperberg, pencils by Steve Lytle and Gary Martin. And once again, I have the Bronze Age Doom Patrol Omnibus, but I couldn't resist the double dip and I grabbed these. This run comes just before Grant Morrison took the book to Weird Town, and it's all about the team trying to find its footing post-crisis. Beast Boy is off with the Teen Titans, and Cliff seems to be the last of the original team, or is he? Either way, this era never quite hit the mark, and I've always spotted these in the dollar bin, just like Slash Broad. Look at here, we just talked about that. But anyways, 1987 was a hell of a year, and it's interesting to see the shift once Morrison took over. DC Comics Presents number 72, published in 1984, also written by Paul Kuperberg, with art by Alex Savick and Dennis Jensen. So this title was always a childhood favorite. I mean, you have Superman teaming up with oddball characters, which made most issues a fun time, in my humble opinion. And one of my first comics was the Deadman team-up, but I also had this one. And let me tell you, it's a trippy, surreal affair where Superman joins forces with the Phantom Stranger to confront a cosmic Dark Lord gone mad in a far-out voyage inside his fractured mind, man. And the Stranger ropes in the Joker to help, and even more madness ensues. It's weird, philosophical, and a Bronze Age bonker. I love it. But sorry, I keep on staring at that superpower ad. I used to have quite a few of those. Camelot 3000 number 1, published in 1982, written by Mike W. Barr, pencils by Brian Boland. And as I've said before, I love me some Brian Boland. What can I say? I'm a sucker for his cross-hatching. But I'll confess, I did not read this back in the day. These issues were always in the dollar bins, so I figured it probably sucked. I mean, who doesn't love a futuristic Camelot with aliens? Apparently not me. But it wasn't until I found the deluxe edition on clearance a few years back that I finally read the whole thing, and honestly, I appreciate it way more now, especially knowing how much detail Boland poured into this. So I found a bunch of Batman books I used to have, like this early 90s Detective Comics and a double pack of Batman with 443 and 444. But we'll skim through a couple that were some of my favorites growing up. 413 by Joe Duffy, which has the Ghost Samurai story, and 422 by Jim Starlin. And these were published between 1987 and 1988. And I've been a Bat fan since I was 3, and some of my first memories are of Saturday morning cartoons, watching the Super Friends and the New Adventures of Batman, Plus, the 1966 TV show was always in syndication, so I ate it all up. I had the Batman coloring book, comics, action figures, even the Underoos. Saturday morning cartoons were a hell of a propaganda machine. But I really loved this era before things got darker and right before the explosion of the 1989 film, which unleashed a tidal wave of Bat merch and Bat books. I mean, Batmania was real, and honestly, it was a great time to be alive. And yeah, I liked it when it got darker, but I'm glad I got to witness the transition. Aquaman 62, published in 1978, written by our Doom Patrol pal Paul Cooperberg, cover by Jim Aparo with interiors by Don Newton and Bob McLeod. And as a kid, I was never interested in Aquaman. I mean, I appreciated he was a part of the Super Friends, but I'd always pass on his comics. And as a teenager, I did like Peter David's take, but not enough to stick with a run. But I did snatch up the deluxe edition with the classic Bronze Age Death of a Prince storyline, which this is a part of, and since the majority of it is drawn by Jim Aparo, it really had me hooked. Either way, I definitely appreciate this era more than I did as a judgmental child. Amethyst, Princess of Gemworld, number 13, published in 1986, written by Keith Giffen and Robert Loren Fleming, art by Ernie Colon and Carl Kessel. So this is another title I would always find in the dollar bin, but would never give it a chance. Until now. I saw Dr. Fate's helmet, Keith Giffen's name, and it was a Crisis crossover. Why the hell not? But honestly, I always judged this book as a girl comic. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but at 12 years old, I wanted to read X-Men, Batman, and anything with ninjas. Is that so wrong? Either way, I also thought there was a toy connected to this, like Crystar the Crystal Warrior, but nope, just a princess with mystic powers. Son of Ambushbug, number 6, published in 1986. And once again, we have a story by Keith Giffen and Robert Loren Fleming, art by Giffen and Bob Oxner. And this is another character I haven't read much of, but I recently caught an old interview with Keith Giffen where he said Ambushbug was basically himself, just reacting the way he would if thrown into wild superhero nonsense. So I've had these on my radar ever since, and wouldn't you know it, I ended up finding the final issue of the mini first. Oh well, I don't think it's going to be too hard to track down the rest, but I may just succumb to reading this digitally. Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 14, published in 1990, written by Dan Mishkin and art by Jan Dersuma. So I would occasionally pick these up back in the day, but I was more of a Forgotten Realms dude, and yes, I dabbled in D&D, and 1990 was the end of my era as a sorcerer. Because you see, back then, the Teenage Dark Trinity was comics, wizards, and Slayer, but that started to wane as guitar, video games, and girls took my attention. But these comics were fun, kinda cringe, but fun, and if you play, there's plenty of lore and ideas to pull for campaigns. So I found a handful of adventure comics starring the Spectre, part of the infamous Bronze Age revival by Michael Fleischer and Jim Aparo, and I just ordered the Wrath of the Spectre omnibus, but I couldn't resist grabbing these. I love collected editions, but there's something about the original format that hits differently. Either way, we'll skim through a couple of these, and lose page. What you gonna do? But these comics fall squarely into the Bronze Age horror meets superhero genre, and Spectre, he's not here to rehabilitate, he's here to punish. This version is all divine wrath and gruesome justice, no questions asked. Now, the character definitely evolves later on, first under Doug Munch, and then more deeply with John Ostrander, whose Spectre Omnibus is coming out this year, but those runs get heavier and more philosophical, and these early issues keep it simple. Justice is brutal, eerie, and immediate. That said, one of these do dip into real-world territory with a terrorist group clearly modeled after the Symbionese Liberation Army, you know, the ones who kidnapped Patty Hearst. So even in the blood and pulp, there's a hint of social commentary bubbling under the surface. For the DC Scrolls finale, we have a few DC's first issue specials published between 1975 and 76, and we'll be creeping through the Creeper issue as I've always loved this crazy ass character. What can I say? I dig his style. But his real name is Jack Ryder, a former TV talk show host who ends up getting dosed with some weird drug that transforms him into a Joker, Spider-Man hybrid, a chaotic good type of guy. And of course, this was created by Steve Ditko. It's weird, energetic, and full of that manic charm only he could pull off. It also quietly reboots the Creeper for the Bronze Age as an anti-hero, but he never quite blows up like the others. Also looking forward to digging into Kirby's Dingbats. Once again, he tries to tap into youth culture, so I'm all in. And there you have it, Phase 2 of our Sacred Hall, featuring the DC Scrolls. Which one spoke to you, and what DC relics have you found in the bins lately? But don't forget, we've got one more step before the initiation is complete. Part 3, the Marvel Codex. And if the spirit of Will Eisner moved ya, bless that like button and tap subscribe to seal your place among the initiated.